Hello everyone. In this session, let us understand the concept of two-dimensional array. So far, we have seen the concept of single dimension, like a list of grocery items, list of names of the students of a class, etc. These are all the types of single dimension. And the way we declare single dimension is something like this. Let us say we want to create a single dimensional array of strings. Then I will write string and then one square bracket over there, then the name of the array, and at the end in the curly brackets I will write the items, like for example Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday, so on and so forth. So this is a single dimension. Now a two-dimensional array will be an array of arrays. Let us say in the contents of an array, instead of the strings, what if we add another array as part of array? So for example, instead of this Monday, it is going to be another array which contains string. Instead of Tuesday, it is going to be another array which contains strings. Instead of Wednesday, it is going to be another array. So an array of array will be a 2D array. So for example, over here, if I add another array, instead of Monday, if I add something like say A, B, C, and instead of Tuesday, if I add another array which contains say E, F, G or E, F, that's fine. And then instead of Wednesday, we add another array which contains say something like this. Some items. So now this is an array, but every element of an array is another array. So this becomes a 2D array, and to declare this, all we need to do is just put another square bracket over here. So now this ARR will be called as a 2D array, and every row of this array. Now when I'm saying row, let me just break it down in a tabular format so that it can be represented as a row. So over here, now if you look closely, this outer array has 3 rows, or you can say 3 elements, and every element of this ARR contains another array. So the first element contains an array which contains 3 elements, second element contains an array which contains 2 elements, third element contains an array which contains 4 elements. So this is the concept of 2D array, where an array contains arrays, array of array. So if you look at the structure of a 2D array, it will look something like this, where it will have rows, and every rows will have different number of columns. These columns are nothing but the array which is part of that row, which is part of that element. So let us say we are looking at an array which contains 5 elements, and every element contains another array. So in this case, first row contains an array with the elements as summer, autumn, winter, spring. Second element of this array contains an array which contains 3 elements, which is red, blue, and green, and so on and so forth. So where the structure of a single dimensional array was looking like a list, a structure of 2D array is also like a list, but in that list, every element is also an array. Every element is also an array. So let's go back to Eclipse. Now let us see, I want to get the length of these arrays. So over here, if I want to get the length of ARR, I can still take the length by using length method, but in this case ARR.length will give me the length of this array over here. What is the length? 3 elements here. So when you run this program, you will get 3. That is the number of rows. Now you can compare this 2D array with the structure of a table, but not exactly similar, because table has fixed number of columns. Like all the rows of a table has fixed number of columns, but in this case the number of columns inside a row can change. Like in this case, we have 3 rows, and first row has 3 columns, second row has 2 columns, third row has 4 columns. So in that way it is different, but you can compare it that way. Now if you want to get the length of the sub arrays, like an array which is at the 0th index of this ARR, then you can do it like this: ARR of 0, which will give me the 0th element, which is an array itself. And if you do ARR of 0.length, it's going to give me the length of the array at 0th index in ARR. So when you run this program, you will get 3, which is the length of this array. If you say I want to get the length of the second element, which is this third row over here, then we'll get 4 over here. That is number of items of the array in the second index of this ARR. Okay, so this is the structure of a 2D array in Java, where you have arrays as part of element of an array. So to get the length of the outer array, you can simply say ARR.length. To get the length of inner arrays, all you need to do is get that particular dimension or that particular element and then get the length. Now third point is how to add the elements and how to retrieve the elements. Now to retrieve the elements of this array, simply we can do something like ARR, like a table. For example, I want to get the value from first row and first column. So first row has index 0, first column has index again 0. So if you say give me the value at 0 and 0, it will retrieve A for us. So when you run this program, you will get A. Let us say I want to get the value from the third row and the second element. Third row has index 2 and the second element has index 1. So if you put 2, 1, we are going to get the value of this FG over here. So when we run this program, you get this FG. Similarly, you can update the values also. So if you say ARR of say 2, 1, I want to change that value to something else, say something like this, and then again we'll retrieve the same value to see whether it is updated or not updated. So when we run this program, we'll get the updated value for the same slot. So very similar to array, you can retrieve the value by using index, you can update the value by using index. When you define the array, the size is fixed, you cannot change any dimension. Now number of rows are fixed and number of columns in each row are also fixed, you cannot change it. If you try to retrieve something from out of the boundaries, then you will get array index out of bound exception. Okay, now important point, how to iterate over this 2D array. Now to iterate over a 2D array, we can use the modified for loop. What does modified for loop says? It says that for each element in the collection of elements. So for every array in the collection of arrays, give it some name, say X. So for every array X in the collection of arrays ARR, what we want to do? We want to retrieve the elements. Now we want to retrieve the elements one by one. Then we can use another for loop inside. So for every string, say Y, in the collection of strings, that is X in this case. Very important to see over here. Now X will be an array, and then we have to use another for loop to iterate over that. So we are saying for every string Y in the collection of strings, in this case X, and then over here when you display the values of Y, then one by one it will display values of all the elements of this array. What you can do is just to display the values of one row at a time and then put a dotted line in between. We can have this line over here, and when we run the program, you will see values segregated by this dotted line. So these are the values from the first row, A, B and C, and these are the values from the second row, and these are the values from the third row. So to iterate over this 2D array, we can use this modified for loop. First we'll iterate over the rows, and then inside every row we have another array. So to iterate over that array, we will use this inner for loop over here. Okay, so we'll talk about the 2D array more in the next session. Thank you.